Have you ever wondered how we can think smarter, solve problems better, and make decisions with greater clarity? In today's summary, we're diving into Smart Thinking by Matthew Allen. This book reveals how we can harness the power of reasoning and critical thinking to enhance our everyday lives. Whether you're trying to make better choices, understand complex issues, or improve your problem-solving skills, this summary will walk you through the key insights to sharpen your mind and approach challenges more effectively. Stay with me as we explore the tools and techniques that can transform your thinking and set you on a path to smarter decisions. Linking claims in reasoning. A statement is a sentence that expresses an idea or an emotion. These statements are considered claims when they can be tested to determine if they are true or false. For example, "The Earth revolves around the Sun" is a claim because it can be verified or disproved. On the other hand, a question like, "Does the Earth revolve around the Sun?" is not a claim because it doesn't take a position that can be proven right or wrong. Essentially, claims are statements that assert something as the truth. Claims play a crucial role in arguments as they can be used to support a conclusion. When a claim backs up another claim or a conclusion, it's called a claim premise. To conclude, multiple claims are often linked together in a logical sequence. The key to understanding any reasoning process is to break it down into smaller, linked claims. An example of linking claims. Let's consider an example. A person tells their friend to drive carefully because the road is wet. This reasoning can be divided into two claims. 1. The advice to drive carefully. 2. The fact that the road is wet. The first sentence serves as the conclusion, while the second is a supporting claim. By breaking it down, the logic behind the statement becomes clearer. This method of breaking reasoning into smaller parts helps us understand the thought process, especially in more complex situations where connections might not be immediately obvious. Building on this idea. The friend should drive carefully because the road is wet. Why is the road wet? Well, it rained last night. Wet roads are often slippery, and driving on slippery roads is dangerous, leading to the risk of accidents. When we link these ideas together, the argument becomes clearer and stronger. Breaking claims into smaller parts allows us to see how each piece supports the next, creating a logical flow. In this case, the final advice to drive carefully is supported by the understanding that wet roads are dangerous, and this reasoning flows naturally from one claim to the next. More effective reasoning. Better claims. To reach a solid conclusion, the first step is to have strong claims. Good claims are built on solid foundations and are carefully constructed. A well-formed claim follows specific rules, aiming to ensure the message is clear. To build a strong analytical structure, claims must be written clearly. If certain words or phrases need to be repeated for clarity, they should be. Nothing must be left unsaid or unclear. When making claims for an audience, it's important to consider the context. Well-constructed claims must take into account the environment and the people to whom they are being presented. Understanding your audience and their expectations is key. Certain words and phrases can mean different things to different people. This means we need to have a basic understanding of how our audience might interpret these words. By doing this, we gain better control over our communication, allowing us to present our reasoning more effectively. Types of claims. Strong claims are built on a solid foundation, which generally falls into three categories. 1. Claims that are self-evident. 2. Claims that reference authority. 3. Claims based on logical reasoning. Self-evident claims are those that are clearly observable and don't need further proof. They form the basis of more complex reasoning. For instance, the statement, "Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius," is a self-evident claim because it can be easily observed and verified. Claims that reference authority can also be useful in reasoning. These claims rely on the work or expertise of another person or institution. They reference an expert or authority in the relevant field. If you are an expert yourself, you can even use your own authority to make a claim. Additionally, claims can be supported by previous reasoning. In building a logical argument, you may include claims that aren't self-evident or based on authority, but that are grounded in solid reasoning. By doing this, you create a stronger analytical structure where every claim is connected logically, making the overall argument more persuasive. Example of a logical argument. Let's consider an example to illustrate how different types of claims work together. Imagine you want to argue that the climate is changing. You might refer to reports from NASA and other scientific organizations to support your argument. At the same time, you could point to observable facts like the melting of ice caps and rising global temperatures. If you are a scientist, you could also use your own expertise to strengthen your claim. And if you need to explain why the climate is changing, you might rely on studies that show the impact of human activities like deforestation and the use of fossil fuels. By connecting these different claims, some based on authority, others self-evident, and others grounded in reasoning, you create a logical argument. The end result is a stronger, more persuasive case that your audience is more likely to accept. More effective reasoning. Better links. Now that we've learned about forming better claims, the next step is to understand how to link these claims effectively to reach a powerful conclusion. As before, the first step in creating stronger connections between claims is to consider the context in which they are made. Any reasoning that isn't self-evident should be backed by other claims to ensure that the overall idea is clearly communicated. If a claim doesn't seem to have a direct link to the conclusion, it should be supported by a framing premise. A framing premise is a statement that provides context before introducing a claim, especially when the claim's direct connection to the conclusion isn't obvious. This helps in making the reasoning clearer and more cohesive. Example of using better links. For example, let's take this scenario. Imagine someone arguing that companies should invest more in remote work technologies. This is the conclusion. To support this claim, they might cite a report that states, "A study by a leading research firm shows that companies with remote work options have increased productivity." Additionally, the person making the argument might say that they are an HR consultant who has personally witnessed this trend across multiple organizations. In this case, the claim that companies should invest more in remote work technologies is supported by both the report's findings and the speaker's professional experience. By understanding how to form and link claims effectively, you can enhance your reasoning skills and approach challenges with greater clarity and confidence. A personal experience, however, often these supporting points only hold weight when framed properly. The framing premise about the study and the speaker's expertise provides the necessary context to link the conclusion with solid reasoning. It's also important to ensure unity between the scope of your claims and their certainty. This means that the language used in the claim should accurately reflect the evidence and the range of what is being claimed. For example, let's say someone concludes that all employees prefer working from home. This conclusion is problematic if it's based on a few conversations with remote workers. A more accurate claim might be, "Some employees I've spoken to prefer working from home." Broad generalizations require broad evidence. Without enough supporting data, claims that attempt to generalize can become weak. Generalizing means assuming something is typical or representative of a larger group. Strong generalizations can only be made when there's enough evidence to back them up. A framing premise helps ensure that the audience understands why supporting claims are necessary. And, as always, we should be mindful of the accuracy and scope of the claims we make, ensuring they are backed by solid evidence. What kinds of reasoning are there? In philosophy, reasoning is often categorized into two main types: deductive reasoning, and inductive reasoning. Understanding these types allows us to build stronger arguments and to break down and analyze claims with greater clarity. By mastering these different approaches, we can better explain our reasoning and evaluate the strength of others' arguments. Deductive reasoning involves drawing a conclusion based on the logical connection between two or more premises. These premises, when linked, lead to a conclusion that must be true if the premises themselves are true. The connection between the premises might not always seem obvious, but the conclusion flows naturally from them when examined closely. For example, consider this scenario. Sarah is under 18 years old. In most countries, people under 18 cannot vote. Therefore, Sarah cannot vote. In this reasoning, we are connecting Sarah's age with the act of voting through the rule about voting age. While there might not be a direct connection between Sarah and voting at first glance, deductive reasoning ties the ideas together logically. However, the effectiveness of this reasoning depends on the truth of the premises. If one premise is false, for instance, if Sarah lives in a country where the voting age is lower, then the conclusion would be incorrect. The strength of deductive reasoning lies in its certainty. If the premises are true, the conclusion must also be true. Inductive reasoning, on the other hand, works differently. Rather than providing absolute certainty, inductive reasoning offers conclusions that are probable based on the evidence at hand. This form of reasoning allows us to infer broader patterns or possibilities from specific observations, but it doesn't guarantee a definitive answer. Instead, it points to what is likely or plausible. Let's take the example of a detective investigating a crime. The detective gathers various pieces of information. A witness claims they saw someone near the crime scene. The suspect had a known conflict with the victim, and the suspect's belongings were found nearby. From this evidence, the detective might conclude that the suspect is guilty. However, this conclusion is based on likelihood, not certainty. It's possible that more evidence could emerge, shifting the suspicion to someone else or providing an alternative explanation for the suspect's presence at the scene. The key difference between these two types of reasoning lies in the certainty they provide. Deductive reasoning gives us firm conclusions. If the premises are correct, the conclusion must follow. In contrast, inductive reasoning leads us to conclusions that are probable but not guaranteed. Inductive reasoning is especially useful when dealing with uncertainty, where we don't have all the facts, but can make educated guesses based on available information. Understanding these two types of reasoning helps us better assess the strength of an argument. In deductive reasoning, a false or weak premise can undermine the entire argument. In inductive reasoning, the more evidence we gather to support a claim, the stronger our conclusion becomes. But there's always the possibility that new evidence could change the outcome. Both types of reasoning are foundational to philosophy and logic. By learning to identify and apply them, we can sharpen our thinking and improve our ability to reason through complex issues. Whether we're building our own arguments or evaluating others, knowing the difference between deductive and inductive reasoning helps us navigate the world of ideas with more clarity and confidence. Research, reasoning, and analysis are crucial. At some point, most of us need reliable information on a particular subject. The natural instinct for many is to search online, often starting with Google. The internet contains a vast amount of information, far more than any of us could use in a lifetime. But by knowing how to search and analyze effectively, we can find valuable and trustworthy information amidst the overload. The first step is to clearly define the topic we're researching. This sets the parameters for what we're looking for and helps us filter out irrelevant information. Once the topic is clear, we can begin our search for useful data. Reliable information can come from various places. For scholars and experts, academic conferences are where they present new research to their peers. Academic journals are also key, as they publish research for a specialized audience. On the other hand, Popular magazines and articles are intended for a general audience and may not include the detailed evidence found in academic sources. For more in-depth and trustworthy information, academic sources are generally more reliable than popular media. As we encounter new information, it's important to ask how it connects to what we already know. Does it directly relate to our topic, or is it more general? If it's general, we can either try to relate it to our subject or continue searching for something more specific. What should we do when we find contradictory information? For instance, one source might say that internet censorship is easy, while another argues it's nearly impossible. This is an example of a conflict in the information. The next step is to ask if there's a way to resolve this contradiction. If not, it's important to analyze why two sources offer opposing perspectives on the same issue. In research, information is typically divided into two types of sources: direct and indirect. Direct sources include interviews, personal observations, and experiments or surveys you've conducted yourself. Essentially, anything you've directly participated in. Indirect sources, on the other hand, include news articles, academic papers, and surveys or studies conducted by others. People sometimes overlook the value of indirect sources, but they can still be valuable if we understand them in context. For example, a person's speech would be considered a direct source, while a biography about that person is an indirect source. To properly evaluate an indirect source, it helps to ask questions like, who wrote it? When was it written? What was the author's intent? What biases or values might they have had? By understanding the context in which the information was produced, we can better decide how to use it to support our arguments or conclusions. Knowing how to search for information and critically analyze it is an essential skill. It allows us to evaluate what's reliable, discard what's not, and base our reasoning on sound evidence. In doing so, we become more critical thinkers, capable of identifying good reasoning and avoiding poor logic. Planning and creating your reasoning is fundamental. The foundation of human civilization is built on asking questions and seeking answers. It's in our nature to be curious, and questioning is a critical part of reasoning. We should be asking questions at every step to ensure that our reasoning is sound. When analyzing information and constructing our own arguments, there are certain key questions we can ask ourselves. The first set of questions relates to the purpose and context of our reasoning. Why are we reasoning, and who is it for? What kind of audience do we have, and what are their expectations? What is the definition of the reasoning we're presenting, and what approach will we take? Understanding the audience and context helps shape how we present our arguments. Next, we should focus on the conclusion. What is the conclusion we're aiming for? What are the main ideas, values, scope, and likelihood of this conclusion? Does any part of it need further explanation or reasoning? How does this conclusion connect to other conclusions on the same subject? And most importantly, what kind of evidence do we need to support this conclusion? Then we turn to the reasoning itself. Once we've created an analytical structure, we should question the claims. Does any claim require a definition or framing premise to make it clear? Are the claims well constructed, and do they show a clear connection to the conclusion? Is the foundation of these claims strong? And if not, what can we add to strengthen it? Are the claims enough to support the scope of the conclusion? Finally, after answering these questions and making necessary revisions, we should consider the broader context in which we are working. What kind of thinking has been applied to the reasoning? Were any premises implied rather than clearly stated? Are all claims clear and easy to understand? Most of us have used mind maps at some point in our lives. Whether for a school project or a complex data set, mind mapping is a form of planning. Planning is crucial because it allows us to present everything in a structured and organized way, making it easier to understand the connections and links between different points. An analytical structure for planning can look different, but the basic idea remains the same. We often use arrows or symbols to indicate connections between ideas. The first step in planning is to organize all the information and reasoning points one by one. For example, college education should be accessible to everyone. College education is not free in most countries. Studies show that employment rates are low and poverty is high in many regions. A college education is essential for obtaining well-paying jobs. College teaches the necessary skills for high-paying careers. Surveys show that people with a college education earn more than those without one. Higher salaries lead to less poverty and a reduced economic burden on society. From here, we can begin drafting the argument in a straightforward manner. The introduction would start with the conclusion and list the main points in brief. The main body would provide background information, then move on to the core reasoning, detailing each point and expanding where necessary. Each reason should be backed by at least 2 or 3 paragraphs of explanation. In the conclusion, we bring everything together, reinforcing the initial argument and restating the conclusion. By asking the right questions, revising carefully and planning thoroughly, we can create arguments that are convincing and earn the trust of the audience. And there you have it, Smart Thinking by Matthew Allen. We've explored how reasoning analysis and thoughtful questioning can reshape the way we approach problems and decisions. Whether you're looking to enhance your personal life, career, or even daily problem solving, these strategies can help you think more critically and act more wisely. If you found these insights valuable, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more summaries that break down the world's best ideas. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep thinking smart.